What are the different types of manuscripts, and then how do I decide which one to use?
That's a good question. So if I said go talk to your mentor, that would be like, this guy doesn't want to tell me. Okay. So most journals have various types of manuscripts that they accept, but the most typical ones are full research articles, brief research articles. Then there are editorials and commentaries, systematic reviews, and I can explain any of those if you want. But systematic reviews, I went ahead and looked up, for example, what kind of manuscripts are accepted by the American Journal of Public Health, for instance, and they accept 13 kinds. And as I said, some of those are research articles, brief articles, systematic reviews, letters to the editor. Letters to the editors are generally written in response to some recent publication. Then editor's choice sometimes happens, and editors sometimes commission people to write something for them. And then there are opinion editorials. We are writing some opinion editorials. A group of us are writing right now for the Journal of Public Health Management and Practice, and that is about workforce, for example. And there are other kind. And as I said, there are commentaries. So the commentaries are again mostly on recently published research. There are analytic essays, and analytic essays are generally on topics that are useful. For example, if we are in public health, to the public health folks, they analyze. They are pretty much like, they could be data-based or could be just based on kind of synthesis of literature, but then the expertise of the authors, actually, they are expressed. So somewhat a combination of an editorial, opinion editorial, and a pure research article. And then there are public health practice notes, so notes from the public health practitioners from the field. And then sometimes there are basically the news. So for example, this Journal of Public Health Management and Practice, often publishes news from Nature and news from ASTO. And sometimes people submit images with very brief comments. So these are kind of typical of research article types.
What ensures success in publishing a manuscript, and do we have to have significant associations in order to be successful?
Let's take your second part of the question first. People think that only significant findings are only the ones that are published by research journals. And the answer is that although there might be slight bias based on the reviewers' comments, reviewers might be a little bit kind of influenced by the type of finding. Several studies have found that at the editorial level, there is not that kind of bias. So the editor's office do not reject articles more often than not. They don't reject articles based on whether the findings are significant or not, or when I say findings are significant, I mean if the differences are significant among subgroups being compared, or if the null hypothesis is being rejected or supported. Based on that, generally, editors or editorial offices do not make decisions. Actually, it creates a bias in science when findings that are negative are suppressed and findings that are significant are projected. That creates a bias in science. So therefore, it doesn't happen in most journals' offices. Okay, so what kind of articles are more successful? Obviously, well-written articles. Articles where there is an alignment on the things we were talking about. The purpose, So the stated purpose of the article matches with the stated research questions, it matches with the research hypothesis, and the variables we say we will be using in the research hypothesis, they match hypothesis. And then the data match the variable requirement. And then statistical methods match the level of measurement of the variables. And then it's the findings are written in a way that doesn't show researchers' own bias. And on top of that, some research shows that, so I'm looking at a study right now that found that manuscripts with a better quality of methods, so methodologically rigorous, higher quality articles are more likely to be published. Also, articles that are systematic review, that study found that they are more likely to be published. And then also, although we don't do a lot of randomized controlled trials, but articles involving randomized controlled trials are more likely to be published. So, but a well-written article that pursues the research in the fashion that should be, if the rigor is kept, and if it's done on the principle of scientific research, they are likely to be published. And then again, it varies because varies by the type of journal. Sometimes a very well-written article submitted to a wrong journal, wrong in the sense that a journal that has a different mission or a different purpose, they would obviously not accept the article because that doesn't fit their mission or the purpose for the journal. So also the articles get rejected if authors fail to follow the author, read the author instructions or follow the author instructions. All journals have some kind of instructions for the authors. And so that would mean the length of the article, the formatting type, and many other parameters. And if, as authors, we don't pay attention to the author instructions, then generally your paper would be accepted or paper would be rejected by the editors because they would think that we can't even follow the instructions from the journal. Therefore, how well is our research is kind of questionable.
What are the different sections or part of a manuscript, and do I need an outline before I even start?
There is a typical manuscript, let's say research manuscript, with a IMRD, which means introduction, methods, results, and discussion subsection. So that's kind of a minimum standard in scientific research. Some journals would require you to do a little more. For instance, I'll just use this journal. The Journal of Public Health Management and Practice requires you to do that, plus to include conclusions in addition to discussion. And also, since in case of this journal, their priority is to produce evidence for public health practice, they require you to actually identify what are the practice implications and what are the policy implications. So they require you to create a box with bullet points as to, okay, having said and done all that we said we'll do, what kind of implications flow out of your findings for both research and practice. And as I said, only research that can be useful, in this case useful to public health practice and policy, it will be considered good research. So in this case, this journal actually forces an author to think through and come up with very clear recommendations for the policy and practice. So the typical sections, as I said, is the IMRD structure, intro, method, results, and discussion, but then it could vary based on the general requirements.
And so do I need an outline?
So yes, So thanks for reminding me the second part. Yes, it's always good to first create a very brief outline and then populate the outline. I always tell my students to start with an outline, but even within the outline, start with the purpose and the research questions. And once you decide the purpose and research questions, then think of the data sources that you will be using and research design, and then write rest of the outline. A lot of times, although you would be doing some literature review prior to doing your data collection and analysis, but after some preliminary literature review, you can go ahead and outline the data collection methods and basically the entire methods part before you could write a good literature review. So yes, an outline and even a few iterations of outline is good before writing the article. Another thing that's just off the top of my head that I think is a best practice is to include multiple perspectives. So in other words, I almost never co-author papers as sole author. It's always good to have perspectives from other industries, because the public health, for instance, the world is very complex. Public health is very complex, and individuals generally have just some kind of exposures and not all kind of exposures. To involve others, and by inviting other co-authors, other colleagues to just brainstorm with you, it would always lead to better research questions, better proposal for methods, and better product.
Thank you, Dr. Shah. I think this is going to be very helpful.
Well, you are very welcome.